Today's daf is daf Ayin Tes. We'll start with Omar Lei, and we're 4 lines down from the top. So this is a discussion between Mar Ukva and Rabbanan, where we left off yesterday. And Mar Ukva turns to Rabbanan. He says, "Emily, easy gufa diuvda hekiav." What exactly were the details of this sale that you canceled and nullified, even though there was a shtar, matana shtar mecher? Amalei Rabbanan responds to Mar Ukva, hachi v'hachi avin. These are the details of the story. As we saw yesterday, it's a case where the wife wants to circumvent the Baal's the Baal's authority and rights vis-a-vis Hanachasim, so she gives a matana to her daughter. And then afterwards, she gets divorced or widowed, and she wants everything back from her daughter. Amalei, so Mar Ukva responds to Rabbanan, shtar mavrachas ka'amrit. So you're talking about a shtar that was written not with kavana to transfer ownership, but rather the only reason the shtar was written was mavrachas. Mavrachas means to avoid the claim of someone else, but it wasn't a real serious and deliberate sale. Halchi Omar Chani Loi Par Idi Omar Shmuel Mora Hora Ani Im Yovo Shtar Mavrachas Uyadi Ekraena. So at this point, Mar Ukva accepts the psak of Rav Nachman based on a statement in the name of Shmuel that Mora Horani, I have reshus from the Rosh HaGola to judge in monetary laws, and he only gives such license to people who are absolute bekiyim in the dinim. So that Shmuel, in a sense, presents as an introduction to his ruling his credentials, and his ruling is that if Yovo Shtar Mavrachas Liyodeh Kre'ena, that if the person who received this shtar that testifies to a gift decides that he wants to take this shtar and he wants to claim that the money or the property that was transferred is his, I'm going to rip up that shtar because the one who gave him that shtar, the one who gave the matana, did not give it with his full heart. There was no gemiris das. He only did it for the purpose of lavriach, to avoid someone else's claim, and therefore the shtar is bata. And therefore Rav Nachman's ruling that we completely nullify and invalidate the shtar mavrachas is a valid ruling. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, you ripped up the shtar matana because he said it wasn't done with full heart and for the real, genuine purpose of transferring ownership on the nechasim. And apparently, you, Rav Nachman, were relying on this statement of Shmuel, Mora Hora Yisim Yovo Shtar Mavrachas Fonei Kre'ena. Time of mind. But what's the reasoning of Shmuel when he invalidates the shtar mavrachas? He would not give all of his possessions over to someone else and leave himself penniless. Okay, fine. And therefore, obviously, he wasn't serious about the matan. But hani milu, that makes sense if he's giving all his nechasim to some stranger. Avolabarto, yoiva. But if it's his own daughter, then we should assume that his kavanah was to give it as an outright gift, a complete, genuine gift. So if not responds to Rav, even in the case of one's own daughter, the makom bata, even in that case, nafsha difala, a person would prefer saving himself, and therefore her kavanah was not to give all the nechasim over to her daughter. So based on the ruling of Shmuel, that Shmuel takes the shtar mavrachas and he invalidates it, that's what I say will apply in this particular case of a mother who gave all her nechasim to her daughter. Masechet, the Gemara now raises an objection to Shmuel based on a brayso. The Bryce addresses the case of a woman who has inherited certain monies. She wants to get married, but leave these monies out of the purview, out of the domain of her husband. How can we recommend her to do so in a way that on the one hand she's being mavriach the nechasim from her baal, but on the other hand she can still maintain ownership on her possessions? So how does she give it away, kaviyachol, through a shtar mavachas, and yet not give it away? She gives it away in order to avoid her husband's creating a zchus, a partnership in nechasim. But on the other hand, she hasn't given away nechasim; they're still hers. And the Brisa advocates koseves shtar pasim lacherim. Now, the word pasim here means piyusim. So what you do is you give a gift to someone, and you tell that person, "Look, I'm giving you the shtar, but I don't want you to really acquire ownership on this gift, on these properties. I'm only doing it in order to be mafkia, to remove and block and undermine the zchus of my baal." Now, here you have a number of commentaries. You have the Shita Mekubetes, who says that she's mefayeses the makabel, she yitenes and achosim liosher in Tomus. So she sort of wins him over and says to the makabel that, look, I want to transfer ownership eventually over these nechasim to my yorshim. But he goes a step further and he says that the piyus might involve giving a certain payment to the makabel matana, meaning I'm going to pay you because of your services, because you're willing to be a partner, to be a makabel matana, and for that I'm going to pay you. But realize that I'm only doing it in order to be mafkia the zchus of the baal. That's the opinion divrei Rabban Shimon Gamliel. Chachamim omer that in a case of a shtar pasim, the shtar really is valid, and the kinyan was made, and the edom assigned on the shtar. If the makabel matana decides to trick her, so to speak, and he wants to acquire ownership over these nechasim based on the shtar, he can do so. Why? Because the shtar is a full-fledged shtar and it's valid, and the kinyan was made, and the transfer was effectuated, and therefore the Chacham say the only possible method by which she can circumvent the Baal and yet not give away her nechasim in an irreversible way is unless she writes a t'nai in the shtar, me'ayom u'lichshe'etzeh. The kinyan, the matana that I'm giving you will be chal today when I decide that I want to give that kinyan to you. And when I decide that I want to transfer ownership to you, then the kinyan will be chal mafreya from today, retroactively. And now, because of this t'nai, the makabel cannot actually acquire ownership until so time as she's ratzon, as she gives ratzon. So on the one hand, she's able to accomplish havracha, to be mavriach es nechaser mibayla, by giving them away to this person. But on the other hand, she has the ability to block the kinyan and undermine and disqualify it by deciding I don't want it because she made it tonight. Now here there's a whole discussion in the Achronim here. What exactly is going to happen here? If the husband comes and wants to claim his rights to Nichsei Malug, so she's going to say, well, I sold it to Plony, or I gave it as a gift to Plony. Well, then she's fulfilling the Tanai of Kisheirtza because she's making a statement declaring that she wants that kinyan to be chal, otherwise she won't accomplish Havracha Mibayla. So how is she going to get back on the chassid? And if on the other hand she says, I don't want to validate the kinyan, then it goes back to the Baal. So it's one of the two. Either it's the Baal or the Makabel Maton. There's a long discussion about this in the Chazon Ish. In any event, now we get back to the Kasha, the Meisvei, that is the objection the Gemara is raising against Shmuel. Time or the reason why the Shtar Mavrachas is not going to allow the Makabel Matana to acquire ownership is because the Kosvalei Hachi, she wrote the Tanai, hello Kosvalei Hachi, if she hadn't written this Tanai, Almanas, She'ertze, is then the din would be, hello Kosvalei Hachi, is Kanani Lokech. The Lokech actually made a kinyan on it. So it seems that the Umden Das, that assumption which we evaluate the mindset of the Nosei Matana, that he's only interested in Havracha, but he really doesn't want to effectuate the kinyan, he's not serious about the kinyan, is not true. We're not going to allow for an Umden Das. We're going to say, no, he gave the shtar, and the Makabel Matana received the shtar. That's a kinyan, it's valid, and no backs touch blacks. So this is against Shmuel, because Shmuel says that the shtar is batel, because we do an umdin in his das, and we know that he only had kavod lavriya, and therefore it's not valid. But here it's only invalid with the tanai. And where it says over lo kasha hava kula hava miktzasa. If the person gives away all his nechasim, then for sure we have a definite umdina that the kavana was only lavriya, and there was no gemiris das to transfer ownership in a way that he would be left penniless. But Ho in the Brisa says that the shtar would be valid unless you add the Tanai. That's called miktzos. That's where he's giving away a segment of his nechasim, and then we don't have the umdana that leads us to the conclusion that he didn't have kavanah for the matzah. Or now asks a continued question on Shmuel, and that is the lo kananu lokeach. And if, as Shmuel says, the Makabel Matonu received this shtar is not able to legally acquire ownership on the property because the shtar is batel, so then how does this shtar actually achieve its goal to be mavriach v'nechasim mibaylo? Nikdinu Baal, we should say that the Baal has rights to acquire ownership over his wife's nichsei malud because the shtar that was given as a shtar matan is batel. Amar Abaye asoum kinechasim she'yidun l'Baal al liba de Rabbi Shimon. Here we have to invoke and rely on the shita of Rabbi Shimon, as quoted in the last Mishnah. He holds that if the nechasim that the Baal doesn't know about, then he's not zocher by him. And therefore, if she went ahead and she sold Hanachasim, as we discussed yesterday at great length, then post facto with the Eved, her sale is valid. Why? Because the Baal doesn't know about these Nechasim. And we see already that there's a way in which it's possible that she still retains ownership on the Nechasim, and yet the Baal is not Zochen. And why is that? Because it's Nechasim Shen Yidum L'Baal. So in the case of Nechasim HaMuvrachim, where she was Mavriach the Nechasim by giving Kaviyachol, giving the Nechasim to someone else, that's considered like Enam Yeduim LeBaal. Because the Baal married her, and he didn't know that these Nechasim were hers. He thought that there was a valid maton in which she gave away these Nechasim before the marriage, and therefore it becomes Nechasim Sheni Yeduim, and in that case Rabbi Shimon says that the Baal is not Zocher in the Chasim Sheni Yidum. And this leads us to the Mishnah here in the middle of Ayin Tes. Naflu lak safim, if a woman inherited monies, and we know that the Baal in the framework and the context of Nichsei Malud makes a kinyan on her payros, and here she has liquid assets, she has real money, the Baal does not have rights to collect that money because that's not what Niksei Mulug gives him. Niksei Mulug only gives him the product of her properties, of any mamo that she owns. So what do we do with these monies that belong to her? And the mission establishes that within the framework of Niksei Mulug, you lock up men karka local payroll. So we're going to take our monies invested in real estate, in a sada, and buy a field. Again, it doesn't have to be a sada. And with this field, we're going to produce fruits, or we're going to buy a house, and we're going to rent out the house, and the Baal will collect the fruits of the karka or the rent of the bias. Peros hatlushim in a karka. Let's say she has peros that already were harvested before she entered into the marriage. He has no rights to those peros. Those peros become like liquid assets, possessions that she owns, and you lock up and karka local peros. And once again, the principle is that with regard to whole liquid assets that she brings into the marriage, we invest in karka, and the Baal, in the framework of Niksei Mulug, acquires ownership over the peros. Peros mechubarim lekarka. Here we have a machlokas. What about the fact that she has trees in the field that are producing fruits? The fruits are still on the trees. They haven't been harvested yet. Do we view that as liquid assets, as possessions of hers, or those peros? And therefore the Baal has rights to those peros. Rabbi Meir says that he has no rights to these peros. These peros are still part of karka, and therefore is shomen oson kami yofe b'peros kami yofe b'lo peros u'mosar yilokach and karka v'ochel peros. So Rabbi Meir says the following: that let's make an estimation, and we're going to evaluate the karka, how much it was worth with the fruits and without the fruits. And the increment above and beyond the value of the karka to the value of karka with peros, in other words, the buyer on the market will pay, let's say, 1,000 and another 100 because the karka is worth 1,000, but with the peros, he can harvest it and he can sell it for 300, so he'll be willing to pay an extra 100. So that the increment, the extra 100 now, becomes monies which fall under Niksei Mulug. And what that means is that the Baal is going to insist, and that's his right, to take that 100, invest it in karka, and the karka will produce peros, and he will eat those peros. Chachamim omrim, they say no, mechubarim lekarka is shalom. If there are peros that are still growing on the trees, they have the status not of the keren, not of the liquid assets that she possesses, but rather of peros. However, peros hatlushim in akarka shalom. If there are peros that are not connected to the karka, those are liquid assets. That's money in the bank. He has no rights to that money. However, within the framework, as we said over and over again, of Niksei Mulug, we take those monies, meaning we're going to sell these peros, and the monies that accrue to us as a result of the sale of the peros will be used to invest in karka, and he'll eat the peros of the karka. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Makom sheyofa kocho b'knisa, hura kocho b'yitzios, and the opposite. Makom shehura kocho b'knisaso is yofa koch b'yitzios. Now Rabbi Shimon explains what he had in mind. Keita. Peros hamakubarim lekarka b'knisaso. It's terrible. It's all over. Thousands of names. I can't do it. I mean, I keep killing them. I mean, but I can't live. I can't live.
Everything except
Can you just give me that powder just as a start, and then we'll do the whole thing later? Sorry. I have a problem here that I'm asking my wife to help me solve. So she entered the marriage and the trees or the ground, the sada was producing fruits. The fruits have already grown, but they still have not been harvested. Shalom. Those peros, since they're ready for harvest, despite the fact that they're still growing they're still attached to the ground, they have the din of nichsei malud. And he, the husband, owns those peros shalom. And that's called Yafe Koach Habal B'Knisasa. However, the Itziasa, now when, let's say, for example, he divorces her or he dies, right? And now is Yafa Kocha, right? Yafa Kocha, just 1 second, I'm sorry. We'll take a second of a break here. Because this is really an intolerable situation that I'm facing here. Maybe you have to open it and it gets stuck, it gets coagulated. But just for the time being, so I could finish this Daf Yomi, just do a superficial job, and then later on when I come back today at 9:30, and then I'll do a more the more professional job. So again, now it's Hura Kocho B'Yitziasa. Okay, so he divorces his wife now, and he has no rights to the Peros Hamachubarim Lakarka. Just 1 second. Here it is. Shalah, they belong to her, and he has no zchus. Why? Because he doesn't own karka, he only owns Peros, and these are Mechubarim Lakarka. So when the marriage terminates, then she gets all the karka, and she takes even those peros that are on the karka because they're still attached to the karka, they haven't been harvested. However, in the case of tlushim in a karka, now she has liquid assets when she enters into the marriage, because these, even before the marriage, they were cut down, is therefore b'knisasa shalah. That's called hura kocho. He has no rights to the tlushim in a karka shalah, they belong to her. Right, nichsei malud only applies to peros, but these are not called peros. Why? Because once they were cut down, it's like liquid assets, like money in the bank. However, the Yitziasa, now she has peros that have already been cut from the ground, then he immediately is zocher those peros, midin nichsei malud, shalom, and the fact that he divorces her afterwards doesn't in any way upset or undermine his rights to those peros that are peros gemurim, that tlushim in a karka. The Gemara says pshita, if one of the two bnei hazug want to take the monies that she has and invest them in Ara to buy karka, the ubati, let's say the other spouse, there's like a tug of war here. What should we do with these monies that we have? She comes into marriage with liquid monies, liquid assets, and we say we have to invest them in karka. So one spouse, it doesn't matter whether it's him or her, demands that we buy a field, a piece of land, a karka, and we'll plant the land. And the other says, no, let's buy an apartment, let's buy real estate, and we'll rent out the real estate. So pshita in this case, ara. Why? Because we always look to maximize the profits. We'll get a better profit from selling the fruits that grow in the karka, in the sada, than we would from rental. Bate vidikle. Let's say you have a possibility of investing in a house and renting it out, or to buy date trees to cull it. So in such a case, bate. Why? Because in the case of a date tree, what happens is at some point the trees dry up and they cease to produce fruits, and therefore it's a better investment in something solid like a bias. What if there's a machlokes about the two options of dikle ve'ilone, to either purchase a date palm tree or other trees which are not date palms is dikle? Why? Because a date palm tree produces a massive amount of dates, much more than any other tree. Ilane gufni, if there's a debate as to whether to invest the money in trees or in vines in a vineyard, then ilane, because ilanos are a better investment than vines, because vines get old at a pretty fast rate, much faster than a normal tree, and they cease to produce grapes. Eva Zarda, she had a Yerusha of a forest of Ilanos that produce Ozridin. Now here I need an English translation for the word Ozridin. But the bottom line is that Ozridin is a kind of a tree which they usually cut down. It's not worth selling it on the market. They either sell it as fuel, or they can make out of these Ozridin, apparently, they take the wood of this tree and they make it into beams. So we have to get a translation to Ozridin. I was hoping, Rabbi Rhodes, maybe you could help me with that. If not, I'll just take out a dictionary. Question is, where is my dictionary? I think it's in the other room. So if you have a minute to check that. Any luck, Rabbi?
It's taking me a minute or two to locate it. I'm here in Safaria.
Trouble is, I don't have an art scroll.
I have an art scroll Hebrew that's saying it's very small bitter apples and they're not worth selling.
Bitter apples. Okay, excellent. That's all.
Other than that,
you know what? I'm not even going to waste my time here.
Hawthorns.
Oh,
got it.
That really helps me a lot. But I guess it's a bitter apple, right?
A hawthorn is a very small berry on the tree. It's not actually an apple.
Okay, man. So
but we have the English.
I'm going to leave this out at this point because we want to try to see what we could do in the next couple of minutes. So again, so she has inherited a forest full of these Ozridin trees, or alternatively, Pera de Cavre. So these are those ponds that they dig in the ground and the water collects and they actually grow fish in these ponds. And now the Gemara quotes a controversy about the status of Abba Zardita and Pera de Cavre. Amrila, according to one opinion, Pera, these trees, since they grow from the ground, so they're like peros vis-a-vis the ground. Why? Because you're not interested in the peros of the ilonos, and therefore the elon itself becomes a pri. Or, for example, the dugim is almost as if it was produced by the pond itself, by the kavre, and therefore it's only when we talk about the Karen, right, that the assets that she brings into the marriage that belong to her, that's only the karka below the ilonos, or the pond, the dug up pond below the fish. But the ilonos themselves and the dugim that are swimming in this pond, they are considered peros. It's so interesting because since you're not going to eat the peros of the ilonos, the ilon itself becomes a peri because it's produced by the ground. Or, for example, in the case of the pond, it's interesting that we're saying that the chafir itself, right, is the basic, what we call keren, the principle that's what she owns, and the dugim are considered the peros, and they belong to the Baal as soon as the marriage is effectuated. The Yesh Omer, now we get to the second opinion. The Amri law, Karna. Some say that the Lonos are Karen. Why? Because, again, they produce an inferior quality fruit, but they do produce fruit. And therefore, they have the status of Karen, like the karka itself. And so to the Dugim, which are worth something on the market, she brings that into the market. Into the marriage, and they're liquid assets. This money in the bank, it's worth something. Now here we have to add another element into the equation, which will become hopefully clear as we go along, and that is that these are objects which will get ruined with time, and therefore she's going to want to sell them immediately. So, for example, in the case of the dugim, we consider the dugim as keren because it's liquid assets. It's something that she wants to sell immediately. Or in the case of these ilonos that are producing ozradin, then it's not going to last forever. She'll be mafsed them because they'll, so to speak, disintegrate, and therefore it's whatever it's worth now, that's what it's worth. Just 1 second. The Amrile Karna, right. Klola de Milsa. Now we're formulating a principle that we can apply according to the second opinion of Karna, that Gizo Machlif, Pera, Ein Gizo Machlif, Karna. If you have something which will be disintegrated, but after its disintegration, it will be replaced by something else. Like there's certain vegetations, let's say, you cut them down, and then they get replaced. That's called choser umischadesh. Then those vegetations have the status of pera. They belong to the Baal. Why? Because she won't be left penniless. It'll just reproduce itself or replace itself. But ein gizo machlif, if after you get rid of these that are growing, there won't be a choser or mischadesh, then these are like liquid assets, they're karna. And we can only apply the principle of selling them and buying karka, and then he eats the peros. So Abba Zardisa and Peri de Karva, since it's what? It's Ein Gizel Machlif, that's why the second opinion has it classified as Karna. In other words, if you cut down this Elon, which is called the Zardita tree, then it will not be replaced. Also, if you fish up and catch the fish in this pond, there will be no more fish in the pond. Only what you brought in the pond, that's what you have. And that makes it into Karen, in which case we buy it, we sell it and buy Karka, and the Baal eats the pigs. Rav Zera, Rav Oshia, Rav Yanai, the Amri Leino to say, Rav Abba, Rav Oshia, Rav Yanai. And here we're going to turn to Daf Ayin Tes on the days.